Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to start off with a quotation. Many of us are leading lives of quiet desperation. Sometimes that desperation can no longer keep quiet. I watched it on the film Shall We Dance, the Japanese version, and I saw it on the telly, so it must be true. My name is Antony Carpen. Some of you will know my parents, some of you will have met my grandparents when they were around, and some of you may even know my niece and nephews. So I've really got to be on best behaviour here. I spent the first 20 years of my life here, and I tried to leave Cambridge permanently, twice. As you can see, I failed. First for university and second for the civil service. But my own failings, which I've spoken about, in particular health-wise actually, are, I think, rooted in the institutions of my childhood right here in South Cambridge. And actually that's one of the motivations for me standing. My study of local history since 2016, and some of you will be familiar with my Lost Cambridge blog, has opened my eyes how my generation was let down. The conversations that I've had with people who I used to go to school with has really opened my eyes and shown me how so many of us got to where we were not because of the local institutions that we went through, but in spite of them. And every day we see the impact of those failings of our over-centralised state and ministerial failures. And I say that as someone who used to work as a policy advisor in Whitehall for ministers of all three political parties that have been in government over the past 10, 15 years. We see the potholes outside our £1 million houses, private wealth, civic squalor. Over-concentration of 16 to 19-year-old places and the long commutes that our teenagers, and when the teenagers are here, they are our teenagers, have to make. Transport policy paralysis from ill-thought-through creations of the GCP and the CPCA in the midst of local government austerity. What is to be done then? That's what we're here to debate. I'm not here campaigning for votes because I want more than that. I say, not another generation failed. The overhaul of our city starts here, it starts now, and it involves all of you, as well as ourselves here. What your role is, well, that's up to you. Democracy is not a spectator sport, it requires the participation of all of us. The purpose of my campaign is to inform and inspire a change in the consciousness of our city. It has already started and continues long after the polling stations have closed and a new councillor elected for Queen Edith, whoever that may be. Let the debates commence. Thank you for listening. Right, so what's my relationship with Queen Edith? Crikey. How long have you got? My first relationship, I guess, it was at Homerton Nursery back in the early 1980s. But I won't give you my chapter and verse life story. I guess it depends on a whole host of things, which part of actually what is quite a large ward compared to some of the other parts of Cambridge, what sort of public services you use, and other demographic features. So, for example, when I was at Hills Road Sixth Form College in the late 1990s, it was at the end of a very rapid period of student number expansion. If you look at the Cambridge Leisure Park now, you'll see that we do not have the infrastructure to serve that concentration and that many teenagers, and that is not the fault of the teenagers. That is a collective long-term failure of both local and central government, because in the early 1990s the way the funding mechanism worked from central government was that both Hills Road and Long Road could only get extra funding if they increased their numbers. So the numbers doubled from the early 90s to the late 90s. Go over to Nine Wells, and I made some videos about the chalk streams there, and also in Cherry Hinton Hall several years ago during the midst of the drought. And obviously the state of our chalk streams is a huge issue. It's heartbreaking to see the waterfall at Cherry Hinton Hall just being reduced to a trickle, because that was somewhere as a child I played in, and at primary school we'd gone for summer picnics and things like that. We are the most polarised and unequal city in the country at the moment, and that is not something that we should be proud of. I can't afford to live in my hometown. I live with my mum and dad. In fact, some of you know my mum and dad in this room. that, so it seems quite bizarre that I'm standing here as a candidate on your ballot paper, yet I'm unable to be independent and afford my own place. For those of you who don't know, 18 months ago I had a heart attack, and I am still in recovery from that, and as a result of that and mental health issues, I have chronic fatigue syndrome, which means that I cannot work full-time, and I want to raise that as an issue when it comes to you considering how you want to cast your vote, because when it comes to moving forward and how we can improve Queen Edith's, how, if I end up getting elected, however unlikely it is, how you work with me, how I work with you is going to have to be different to how the system, which dates back to 1974, and our city boundaries date back to 1935, so they're all hopelessly obsolete as our structures. It's going to have to be different with me, and I'll let the other candidates answer for themselves. Thank you. Well, this is a fun question, isn't it? Because I guess my policies would be whatever the residents told me, because some of them knew me at primary school and they were adults, and if I went against them, I would have hell to pay. Yeah. But actually, no, there's a more serious point here for independent candidates, and this is where you end up having to balance, shall we say, the interests of what might be a very vocal but very influential group, and this is Cambridge, come on, versus the need of the wider city. Now, some of you may not know that actually one of my lead policies or proposals to try and influence all of this lot is to abolish the Greater Cambridge Partnership, which was established by the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats in coalition, because I was filming the council meetings when that happened, and it was Nick Clark, the city's minister, who actually signed it off. Sorry, Dr. Bergam may end up rinsing your party on this one. The other thing is the huge amount of cuts, and I'm such a geek. I went to the House of Commons Library to look at the amount of cuts from central government funding that has gone to Cambridgeshire County Council, and as you can see in real terms, that's kind of like a downward slope. It's not looking good. Feel free, Councillor Thornborough, to hand that one out. And it's not really looking good for Cambridge City Council either. And if we're talking about the future of our city, we are run as a small market town, even though we are a city with a global brand. That is no way to be running a city like Cambridge. And so, my plea to my fellow colleagues is to support the House of Commons Public Administration Select Committee's report, which calls for an overhaul of the governance of England, so that we might actually get a council that actually has the powers to deal with many of the problems that you're talking about, because at the moment local councils don't have any power to tax the huge wealth that is being made on the biomedical campus up towards Fulbourn or on the science park. It doesn't have the powers to build the one thing that I really want, which is the light rail metro that I've been supporting since 2014. I went all the way up to Haverhill to link up with them. And so we are dependent on a system of handouts. Now, that report was signed off by a majority of Conservative MPs. It was rejected by Michael Gove. And so now there is policy paralysis in the Conservative Party in terms of how we move forward. One of the main reasons for me standing is to raise that issue with all of you here, so you can all see that report. I've put all the links on my social media accounts, so you can discuss with the candidates about backing that report and launching that new Royal Commission that will lead to all of us being able to say, actually, this is where the boundaries should be. These are the powers that we want our new councils to have without ministers interfering. And I know what it's like, because I used to be one of those advisors who was working with ministers interfering in local councils in the civil service. So I'm kind of like gamekeeper turned poacher. And ultimately enabling Cambridge and our surrounding towns and villages to shape our own destiny. Is that too much to ask for? Oh, we've got some brownies walking past as well. So thank you.
Person to answer or second to try to explain the City Council's role in the congestion charge, or let's call it the sustainable travel zone, which is what it is. So I'm going to very briefly do 20 seconds on that, just to make sure everybody is clear. And if any of our county or city councillors here tonight want to correct me on anything, please do. But the Greater Cambridge Partnership is an organisation that represents the three main local councils, the two district councils, Cambridge City Council and South Cambridgeshire District Council, and Cambridgeshire County Council. So it's those three form the Greater Cambridge Partnership. It's the Greater Cambridge Partnership, which is a group of people which have been tasked, amongst other things, with sorting out ideas to solve upcoming transport issues in the city. Each of the three councils has a representative on the GCP board which will make decisions or recommend courses of action. So there is a representative of South Cambridgeshire District Council, there's a representative of Cambridgeshire County Council, and there's a representative of Cambridge City Council. Those three people on the board will make a recommendation based on what their officers have come up with. So one of those is a representative of Cambridge City Council, and the councillor we elect will be one of 42 city councillors who will have an input to that one person who will be one of three on the board. So you can see the impact of a city councillor on the recommendation made by the GCP is not huge, but it does exist, and that's the important thing. The GCP board will then recommend to the county council what they think it should do. The county council will then discuss it. As they were one third of the GCP, they will probably agree to carry on with their recommendations, but they may not do. And to get things working, the scheme is currently proposed, which will need a lot of work to do with the buses as well. That will need the additional support of the combined authority, who haven't mentioned yet, under the Mayor of Cambridgeshire, Peterborough. So there's a lot of people involved. The city councillors have a very small role to play, but it does exist. And I just wanted to make sure that people know that, in case anybody stands up and says we have nothing to do with it, or think we have everything to do with it. That said, question 4. Anthony's going first on this one.
Short answer, abolish the GCP. If you abolish the GCP, congestion charging gone. Now, slightly longer answer, because some of you will quite understandably say, well, how are you going to make up the funding shortfall for public transport? I come back to the parliamentary reports. This one, headline, Council Finances Unsustainable Without Reform, say MPs, 19th of July 2021. That was from the Levelling Up and Homes and Communities Committee, of which, again, a majority of the MPs are Conservative. But it's chaired by Clive Betts, who is a Labour MP. I'm a geek, sorry. Second one, as you can see, system of government in England in need of serious overhaul, say MPs, 31st of October 2022. Committee calls in Levelling Up Secretary over government response to report on governance arrangements for England. That is what I mean by our governance arrangements being a complete mess. 1969, this was published. This is a Royal Commission publication on the local government of England. That is what Parliament is recommending. If we want what I'm calling for, either a unitary authority based on the recommendations from 1969, or on the boundaries that we used to have for the old Cambridge County Council in 1945 here. I told you I'd gone into the history. And that's where the negotiations would start from. That is the legal and legislative and public policy process that you would go through involving Parliament, because Parliament is sovereign and they're the only ones who can legislate for it. The City Council does not have the legal powers to do it. That is the route. So one of the reasons for me standing is to say to all of the candidates, they need to influence their political masters up top in order to adopt the recommendations of those parliamentary select committees and get them in their manifestos. Now, because I haven't been getting that much traction, I'm asking all of you to influence all of them so we can get a council that can actually deal with a lot of the issues that you've been talking about. For example, potholes. because at the moment the Chancellor's announced another pothole fund, but wouldn't it be easier if local councils had the power to tax the big tech firms to actually pay for A, the potholes, and B, the light rail system, and C, the segregated cycle and active travel network and walking trails instead? So you wouldn't have to go all the way back to ministers for approval and have people like I used to be working away, looking through all of that paperwork, doing the assessments, scoring each and every local area. It's a bureaucratic nightmare. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, trust me. That is basically where my kind of plea comes from, because otherwise what will happen is we will go around and around in circles as we have been doing for the past 15 years. My YouTube channel is full of videos from the GCP, the Combined Authority, the County Council, South Cambs District Council, Cambridge City Council. It's done my head in. Thank you. I come back to my point again. In the grand scheme of things, Cambridge City Council does not have the legal powers, does not have the resources, and does not have the expert staff that it needs to take on the developers, and in particular the biomedical campus. I was there in the early 2010s. In fact, the former Lib Dem MP for Cambridge, Julian Huppert, actually took me on a tour in the run-up to the 2015 general election. The Greater Cambridge Partnership and the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority were both set up to try and deal with some of these things, but as Dame Margaret Hodge, the Labour MP for Barking, said when she was chair of the Public Accounts Committee, the entire system of local public services is so fragmented that transport is separate from housing, which is separate from education, because Michael Gove brought in the academy system, which is separate from your local GPs, which is separate from your dentists. They don't talk to each other. I come back again to the GCP tramways. I asked about them, and Conservative councillors said, no, we're not going to have them. I asked them in 2016, 2017 and 2018. I also asked about railways. They said, no, I've been inviting people to get involved with the Cambridgeshire bus campaign. I haven't got anywhere with that. But that's a very nice bus that they've got. Can we have some of those? That would be lovely. I am a member of the Cambridge Cycling Campaign. One of the reasons why I'm a member of the Cambridge Cycling Campaign is because on these streets in the early 1990s, I did my cycling proficiency. And also cycling on my paper round, I know how dangerous the roads are for children, which is one of the reasons why I'm calling for the GCP to be abolished, because they've got the congestion charging thing completely the wrong way around. The idea is that you learn from Camborne and you build your transport infrastructure first, because the idea of whether it's a congestion charge or road user charge is that charge persuades people to move on to alternatives rather than just basically ending up paying what ultimately acts as a tax. One other thing that we don't have that we desperately need for our city in terms of a facility are out-of-bound freight exchanges, so that our cycle couriers that we've got that have set up shop here can actually take those small packets onto their cycle or e-cycle courier bikes and do the deliveries rather than having these huge white vans going around town. One of the things that's causing all of the one of the things that's causing a lot of the potholes. So again, I'm coming back to the root of the problem, which is the lack of powers and the poor structure of local public services, recalling that historically many of these public services, including the utilities, Cambridge University and Town Water Company, Cambridge Town and University Electricity Company, they all used to be under the umbrella of the local council. Even the Mayor of Cambridge was the Chief Magistrate. But we've lost all that. That is how fragmented we are. Like I said, please influence these people, and please ask them to influence the people upstairs. Otherwise, you're going to spend the next 10 years going grey and bald like I am. Thank you. One of the greatest men who lived in this part of town was a gentleman called Brinley Newton-John. He had a daughter called Olivia. Some of you may remember her. And in the Sydney 2000 Olympics, she sang a song called Dare to Dream. Please have a look at it. It's an incredible song, and that's what I want you to do in terms of dreaming and doing to make our city great. I tried that in 2014 when I actually used my social media avatar to stand for election, as you may have seen, and the result was a dragon slide in Coleridge Rec, which is incredible. The Labour councillors decided to celebrate it. Cambridge Great Park. Have a look at the proposals about the massive expansion of Wandlebury. We heard earlier about how relatively wealthy Queen Edith is, even though we know there are micro pockets of extreme poverty here. We should be supporting the rest of our city because it will benefit us. For example, a new swimming pool in North Cambridge by the Science Park station, because it will free up Parkside, therefore benefiting us. We had some wonderful designs for a new Guildhall. Can we do something about that? And basically redoing the facade in the revamp that we are going to need. Councillor Thornborough in front of me is familiar with me pestering people like that. Florence Ada Keynes, the mother of modern Cambridge. You are going to hear a lot about her over the next couple of years. She was one of the greatest women who served our city. We would be in a very different place with her. I would like to see Cambridge build a brand new concert hall like we were promised in the 1960s. Downing Street was where we were supposed to have it. There it is. There's Downing Street. Instead, we got a hotel. We could have had that Guildhall as well with a concert hall. Instead, we only got the Assizes Hall with 4 acoustics. Church of Our Lady and English Martyrs. Opposite there is a big site that the university is not doing anything with. That's where I want that concert hall, not least because Florence Ada Keynes lived there for 70 years of her life. She was our first woman councillor to be elected to Cambridge Borough Councillor. She was our second mayor, and she also was the mother of John Maynard Keynes, and that's where Keynes got a lot of his economics from. Sir Ivor Jennings, QC, he was the Vice-Chancellor, and he said it was the university's duty to improve the city. If you are a university member, please remind them of it, because he also said the university will fund 50% of that concert hall's cost. And finally, extends the Museum of Cambridge by rebuilding our Assizes Hall on Castle Hill. Thank you.